The night Hannah knocked on my door, rain hammered against the windows like the sky itself was trying to forget something.
We can't keep
It was
ignoring
past
this.
midnight
What
in a
choice do we
quiet
have?
Asheville,
We
North
face it
Carolina
together.
neighborhood. The kind of place where nothing ever happens, and nobody ever knocks that late, unless it's truly urgent. I had just put my 6-year-old son, Caleb, to bed after a long shift at the warehouse. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at unpaid bills, when the knock came again, soft, desperate, almost ashamed of itself. When I opened the door, I was unprepared for what I saw. Standing there barefoot on the porch, drenched to the bone, mascara streaked across her pale cheeks, was Hannah Collins. She had moved in next door 3 months earlier with her fiancé, a man whose smiles were loud and whose shouts were louder. I had overheard their fights through the thin walls, sharp words cutting the night like glass. But this time, there was only silence behind her, and fear in her eyes. Before the story continues, if you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in opening your heart even when it's broken, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe. Stories like this remind us that the most powerful moments often happen when we least expect them. Hannah's voice trembled as she asked if there was space in my bed. Not seduction, not shame. She spoke as if asking for a lifeboat in a storm. I understood immediately. She wasn't asking for romance. She was asking for safety. My first instinct was to protect Caleb. My second, to protect myself. I had already buried one love 3 years earlier when my wife, Grace, died in a car accident. Since then, my life had been a narrow hallway. Wake, home, fatherhood, survival. I didn't let people in. My heart felt like a house with the lights turned off. But as I looked at Hannah shaking in the Carolina rain, I remembered standing alone in a hospital corridor after losing Grace, wishing someone would just say, "You don't have to carry this alone." No one had. I promised myself that if I ever could, I wouldn't turn someone away. So I stepped aside. I let her in. I gave her towels, made tea, spread extra blankets across my bed, and told her she could take it while I slept on the couch. She hesitated, kindness confusing her more than cruelty ever had. She apologized, saying she didn't want to be a burden, that she would leave first thing in the morning. But I told her there was no rush. For the first time in years, the house didn't feel empty. The next morning, Caleb met her with a child's blunt honesty. He asked why she looked sad and whether she liked pancakes. Hannah smiled, and for the first time, I saw warmth in her expression. Watching them at the small kitchen table, powdered sugar floating in the air, I realized how much I missed laughter echoing against these walls. Hannah stayed a few days at first, then a week. Her fiancé, Tyler, came by once, pounding the door, demanding she return. I stood steady, telling him she wasn't his to claim. He glared, wounded, but powerless, and walked away. That was the day Hannah cried in my arms, not out of love, but because she finally saw how small he had made her feel. The town whispered, of course. Widowed father taking in a young woman who left a fiancé, enough to fuel church gossip for months. I felt the judgment in sideways glances at the grocery store. But stronger than the whispers was a quiet certainty that I was doing right. Hannah found work at a local bookstore. She insisted on saving money to move out eventually. Every time she mentioned it, something inside me tightened. I didn't want her to leave, not because I needed someone to warm my bed, but because she had begun warming my life. She helped Caleb with homework, planted flowers in the neglected yard, cooked meals that filled the house with smells I hadn't realized I missed. But fear followed me like a shadow, terrified to love again, terrified that if I opened my heart, God would take it away like before. Lying awake on the couch while she slept in my bed, I stared at the ceiling, arguing with myself. Was I helping her, or just afraid of being alone? One evening, months later, I found Hannah sitting on the porch swing, staring at the sunset bleeding orange across the Blue Ridge Mountains. She told me she had signed a lease on a small apartment across town. Pride in her voice, I searching mine for permission or maybe regret. That's when I realized the truth. I didn't want her to leave, not because she needed me, but because I needed her. Not out of loneliness, but out of love. My voice shook as I reminded her of that rainy night when she asked for space in my bed. I told her there had been space. I told her there still was. Then I asked a question building in my chest for months. Would she stay forever? The silence that followed felt eternal. Doubt flickered across her face. Not about me, but about herself. She had been told she wasn't worth staying for. Love had always been conditional, fragile. And then she did something I will never forget. She reached for my hand and held it like it was sacred, the kind of hold that says, I trust you with my broken pieces. We didn't rush into marriage. We didn't promise forever under fireworks. We simply chose each other every day in small ways. Hannah moved her things into the guest room first, then slowly back into my room, not as a refugee, but as a partner. Caleb began calling her his best friend. A year later, in the same backyard where she planted those first flowers, I asked again, this time with a ring trembling between my fingers. She said yes, tears streaming down her face, not because she needed saving, but because she had found home. Love, I learned, isn't about rescuing someone. It's about standing beside them while they rescue themselves. Hannah didn't just find space in my bed that night. She found space in my grief, in my fear, in the empty rooms of my heart. In giving her shelter, I found my own healing. If this story touched your heart, if you believe the bravest thing we can do is open the door when someone knocks in the dark, like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe. Comment the word forever if you believe real love is built on kindness, courage, and second chances. Sometimes the most important question isn't whether there's space in your bed, it's whether there's space in your heart. And that night in Asheville, when the rain fell like a second baptism, I realized the door we opened for someone else might just be the one that saves us too.